My name is Mark. I'm 28 years old, and I live alone in a weathered old apartment building on the quieter edge of the city. The kind of place with creaky staircases, flickering hallway lights, and neighbors you rarely speak to. I rent a small one-bedroom on the second floor. Nothing fancy, just enough to sleep, eat, and drop into after another long day of deliveries. Being a courier in a big city isn't glamorous, especially the night shifts. By the time most people are turning off their bedside lamps, I'm still weaving between neon-lit intersections and stairwells with cold pizza boxes in hand. It's not a bad job, just tiring. Always tiring. Last Friday was no different, or so I thought. I had one of those nights where time blurs and your legs move on autopilot. Rain had been falling earlier, so the city was slick and cold, and I could feel the chill biting through my jacket. I remember looking at my watch. It was just past 3 a.m., and thinking, just get home. Just lie down. 10 more minutes. The streets were empty, the kind of silence that only a city can make. Distant sirens, a humming streetlight, a sudden rustle of pigeons disturbed by who knows what. I finally turned the corner onto my block and approached the building. Something was off, though I couldn't place it at first. The front door, a heavy, dented metal one with peeling paint, was wide open. That was unusual. Normally, it slammed shut on its own, and you had to buzz to get in if it didn't. I stood there for a moment, peering into the dim hallway beyond, trying to decide whether someone had just forgotten to close it or whether someone was still inside. But exhaustion won. I chalked it up to a neighbor's carelessness and stepped in. The hallway smelled faintly of old wood and something sharper, maybe bleach. The overhead light near the entrance was out, and the rest barely glowed. I trudged up the staircase I knew by heart, half asleep on my feet. Second floor. Left turn. 3 doors down. My keys were already in my hand. Or at least I thought they were. Funny how memory blurs when your body is screaming for sleep. I stopped at a door, turned the knob slowly. It gave way easily, without resistance. Not even locked. I frowned just briefly and stepped inside. It was dark, but I could make out the shape of the couch right away, familiar and warm-looking. The scent of lavender or some soft detergent floated through the air. The apartment felt slightly neater than usual, but my brain dismissed it. I kicked off my shoes, sat down, let my head fall back, and without another thought, I passed out. I woke up in fragments. First, the pressure of sunlight through thin curtains, warming my face. Then, the quiet murmur of voices, hushed, confused, not threatening, but definitely not mine. Then came the stillness. That subtle realization something is off. The first real jolt hit when I looked up. Across from me, against the far wall, was a tall bookshelf. It was white, definitely not mine. Mine was short, chipped, and dark brown. And next to it stood a plant, some kind of leafy thing that drooped in a sad, overwatered way. I'd never owned a plant in my life. Panic wasn't instant. At first, I just stared, thinking maybe I'd moved something last week and forgotten. Maybe I was still dreaming. Then I noticed the photos. A smiling couple, a child, family snapshots in colorful, mismatched frames arranged lovingly on the wall. All of them completely unfamiliar. This isn't my apartment. My heart skipped. I sat upright with a jerk. The blanket that had been laid over me slipped to the floor. Wait, blanket. That's when I heard the cough. I turned my head slowly and saw them. 3 people. A woman in her 40s with a coffee mug in hand, a man about the same age holding a phone like he wasn't sure whether to call someone, and a teenage girl in a hoodie perched on the armrest of a chair, staring at me like I was some odd species of insect that had crawled out of a cereal box. "Morning," the man said carefully, like you'd speak to a wild animal. I opened my mouth, but for a few seconds, no sound came out. My throat was dry. "I'm so sorry. You don't live here, do you?" the woman asked. Her tone wasn't angry. It was laced with a strange mixture of amusement and concern. I shook my head. "No. God, I thought I live just down the hall. I must have." I buried my face in my hands, mortified. My words came out fast, jumbled, tumbling over each other as I tried to explain. I got home late, like really late. I must have been half asleep, and the door was unlocked, and I thought it was mine, and I just saw the couch, and I can't believe this. I'm really sorry. I don't do this." The girl chuckled under her breath. The The man raised an eyebrow. You just walked in? I thought it was my apartment. I repeated desperately. A long beat of silence passed. The woman smiled, not mockingly but kindly. Well, at least you didn't take anything, she said. That broke the tension. The man let out a short laugh and finally lowered the phone. The woman stepped forward and handed me a steaming mug. Coffee, she offered. I took it hesitantly. Thanks, I muttered. And sorry again. The girl grinned and leaned in. We've lived here for 10 years, and we've never tried out the couch. So how is it? That finally made me laugh, in spite of myself. It wasn't just the embarrassment, though that was boiling in my stomach like acid. It was the sheer absurdity of the situation. I had broken into someone's apartment, slept on their couch, and now they were offering me coffee. I swear I'll never live this down, I said. The man smirked. Oh no, you're officially part of our family lore now. The couch guy of 3A. Technically 3B. I corrected, pointing at myself. I live in 3B. The woman chuckled. Close enough. I stayed for another 15 minutes. Not by choice. More like a reluctant surrender to hospitality wrapped in caffeine. The coffee was too good to rush. Strong, bitter, slightly sweet. The kind of flavor that makes your limbs remember mornings that weren't mistakes. The woman introduced herself as Lena. The man was her husband, Victor. The girl, Mira, said she was 17, and it was clear from the way she eyed me that I had already become the most interesting thing that had happened to her in weeks. So how long have you lived here, Mark? Lena asked, stirring her own cup. Almost 2 years, I said. I work a lot. Nights. Deliveries. That explains it, Victor nodded. We barely see anyone from your side of the floor. Always assumed those apartments were half empty. They might as well be, I muttered, and realized too late that I sounded a little bitter. But they didn't press. Instead, the room slipped into something oddly comfortable. Not quite friendship, more like a loose sense of alignment. Like we'd all agreed, silently, that what happened was ridiculous enough to ignore boundaries for a while. And yet, something about it felt off. Not them. Not really. They were warm, welcoming in a way that felt real. But there was an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the apartment itself. Their home looked nothing like mine. Soft lighting, warm wood furniture, shelves stacked with worn books and old souvenirs. And yet, it felt too familiar. There was a photograph on the side table, an older man standing in front of a city monument, waving to the camera with a wide, awkward grin. I was sure I had seen that photo before. Maybe in a dream. Maybe in passing, like déjà vu flaring behind my eyes. You okay? Mira asked. I must have been staring. Yeah, I replied quickly. Just tired. You said you thought this was your apartment, Victor said. Our door must have been unlocked. I nodded. Yeah, and it felt right. At the time. You sure it was an accident? Mira asked, teasing, or maybe not. I smiled weakly. I think so. She tilted her head, something calculating flickering behind her eyes. For a moment, I felt like I was being watched by someone older than her years. Not in a sinister way, exactly. Just oddly still, like she saw more than I was saying. People mix things up in this building all the time, Lena said, standing. The stairwell makes everything feel the same. One floor up, one floor down, and you're in a different world. That line lingered with me. A different world. I checked the time. Almost 8 a.m. I stood, clutching the empty coffee mug in both hands like a shield. Well, I should get back to my own couch, I said with a tired smile. You mean the inferior one, Mira quipped. Lena laughed. You're welcome to test ours again, just maybe not at 3 a.m. I handed the mug back with a grateful nod. Thanks. And again, I'm sorry for the intrusion. Victor opened the door for me. Mistakes happen, he said. But hey, if you ever want to stop by when you're awake, you're welcome. Thanks, I said. I stepped into the hallway, back into my building, my floor, my routine. Or so I thought, because the moment their door clicked shut behind me, I realized something. My door, 3B, was directly across the hall. I turned to look at it. The doormat. The tiny chipped B nailed to the wood. So how had I ended up on their couch, on the other side? I stood in front of my own apartment for a long time, not moving, just staring. The number on the door hadn't changed. 3B. My doormat. the faded gray one with the corner chewed up by time, was right where it always was. The peephole, slightly off-center, the crack in the paint near the knob, the little sticker from the gas company that I kept forgetting to remove. Everything exactly as I remembered it. And yet, something itched at the back of my skull. I turned back toward the door I had just exited. 3A. Same layout, same paint, same hallway. But in the washed-out morning light, it felt displaced. Like a set piece too perfect for the scene. I walked slowly to my own door, keys in hand, and unlocked it. Inside was the apartment I knew. Small kitchenette to the left, a tiny hallway leading to the bathroom, my sad excuse for a couch against the far wall, and the table still littered with receipts, headphones, and an empty energy drink can. The air smelled like stale pizza and yesterday's socks. Familiar. Lived in. Mine. And yet I hesitated before closing the door behind me, glancing back into the hallway one last time. No one was there, just the silence of the building humming around me. I shut the door. But even inside my own home, things didn't settle. I kept thinking about how the door to 3A had opened so easily, unlocked smooth as though it expected me. My own lock, by comparison, had always been a little sticky. You had to jiggle it just right. And then there was the couch. Their couch. It was green. I remember that clearly now. Deep green, with soft, rounded corners and a faint floral pattern stitched into the fabric. I could still feel the texture beneath my fingers, warm from use. Why did I remember it so vividly? I had only seen it for a moment before crashing, hadn't I? And why did their apartment feel echoed? Like I had walked through it before, in a dream, or some frayed thread of memory I couldn't trace. To shake the feeling, I paced. I showered, made toast, even turned on the TV for background noise. But none of it helped. Something about last night gnawed at the edge of my thoughts. Like I had stepped into a pocket of reality that wasn't quite aligned with mine. It felt impossible, even stupid to say out loud, but it sat in my chest like a weight. Midday passed. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw their apartment. The warm light, the photo of the man waving, the 3 faces staring at me like I'd arrived right on schedule. I thought about knocking on their door again, just to talk, to confirm it all happened, to ground myself. But when I finally did go out, maybe around 6 p.m., coffee in hand and nerves tightening with each step, I found something even stranger. There was no door labeled 3A, just mine, 3B, and to the left of it, where their apartment had been only this morning a blank wall. No knob, no hinges, no sign there had ever been a door there at all. I stood frozen, coffee cooling in my hand. No door, just a smooth, unbroken wall, blank, painted over in the same tired eggshell white as the rest of the hallway. No scrape marks, no difference in texture, not even a faint line to suggest a seam or former hinge. It was like the doorway to 3A had never existed at all. But it had. I was there. I had slept on their couch, drank their coffee, laughed with Mira, apologized to Victor and Lena. The memory was solid, tangible. The photo of the waving man was still printed in my mind like an afterimage. I reached out and touched the wall, fingers grazing its surface as if expecting it to give way, some illusion to fall through. Nothing. Plaster. Paint. Reality. I stepped back, heart pounding, trying to breathe through the dizziness curling behind my eyes. My brain scrambled for explanations. Wrong floor? No, I lived here. My keys worked, my doormat was right where it should be. Maybe the neighbors moved out today, and the door was sealed up already? Ridiculous. Even the fastest crews couldn't erase an entire entrance in under 10 hours. I checked my phone. There were no messages, no missed calls, no news from the building management app. Nothing out of the ordinary. So I did something I hadn't done in months. I knocked on a neighbor's door. 3C, just down the hall. An older woman, Tamara, answered. Her hair was up in pink curlers, and she held a cat that looked just as annoyed to see me. Mark, she said, blinking. Everything okay? Yeah, sorry, I said quickly. Just weird question. Do you know the neighbors who live in 3A? She tilted her head. What do you mean? The couple, Victor and Lena, and their daughter Mira? I accidentally walked into their apartment last night. Long story. Just wondering if you know them. Tamara frowned. Sweetheart, there is no 3A. I stared at her. There's my place, 3C, she said, pointing behind her. And yours, 3B. That's it. This floor only has 2 apartments. Been that way since they converted the building 10 years ago. I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I think you're working too hard, she added gently. You look pale. You need rest, Han. I nodded mutely and backed away. She gave me a concerned smile, closed the door, and I was alone again. But not entirely, because as I turned back toward the blank wall, I noticed something. A single faint mark, so faint I might have missed it earlier. It was low to the floor, almost like a scuff. But the more I looked, the more it became clear it wasn't random. It was the imprint of a doormat. Worn fabric fibers pressed against the floor just enough to leave a trace. A ghost of a welcome. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I didn't try, I did. I lay down on my own couch, eyes squeezed shut, telling myself it was a mistake. A hallucination, maybe overwork, fatigue, a stress-induced memory loop. But every time I drifted, I felt it again, the shape of their couch beneath me. The green fabric, smooth and warm. The slight tilt of the left cushion, like it had settled with years of use. My own couch had no such tilt. It was stiff and cold and smelled faintly of takeout. But now it felt wrong, off, like I was lying on a replica, one trying too hard to be something else. Around 2 a.m., I sat up, restless. The city outside was quiet, the occasional car whispering down the wet street below. I wandered to the kitchen for water, then paused, staring at my reflection in the microwave door. My face looked distorted, not drastically, just enough to make my chest tighten. I returned to the living room, letting my hand fall onto the armrest of the couch, but froze. It wasn't mine. I ran my hand across it again. Soft fabric, deep green, faint floral stitching. It was their couch. Impossible. I turned on the lamp. The couch was still mine. Same cheap faux leather, same faded gray-blue tone, same threadbare corner where I used to rest my phone. But when the room was dim, when I wasn't looking, it changed. Or felt like it did. I dropped onto it heavily, rubbing my face. Get it together, I whispered to myself. You're spiraling. But the spiral kept turning. The next morning, I snapped photos of my living room. Everything, every detail. I walked the hall again, tracing where 3 it used to be. Still no door. No sound from behind the wall. But the imprint of the doormat was still there. I checked it later in the day. It was darker, as if something had stood there again. That night, I dreamed I was on the couch, their couch, and Mira was sitting across from me, legs tucked under her, flipping slowly through a photo album. She didn't speak, just looked up once and said, "You came back." I woke with my face pressed into the armrest. The green armrest. When I sat up, I found myself on their couch again. But I was in my apartment. Everything else was mine. The coffee table, the scuffed laminate floor, even the light bulb I'd never replaced in the ceiling fixture. But the couch was theirs. I stood quickly, breathing hard, backing away like it might move. And then I blinked. It was my couch again. Same old thing. But the room didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt borrowed. The next day, I did something I wasn't proud of. I called in sick. There was no way I could navigate the city with boxes and bags in hand when my own apartment, my own mind, felt like it was twisting under my feet. I stayed inside. I didn't trust the outside world not to warp the same way the hallway had. Instead, I sat with my phone and the photos I'd taken the day before. Zoomed in, studied every detail. In the one of the couch, there was a shadow under the armrest, barely visible. But when I enhanced the brightness, it looked like a line, a slit, like something tucked inside the couch. I checked it immediately. Nothing. But the suspicion had been planted. By noon, I'd torn the whole couch apart. Cushions lifted, lining peeled back, everything checked. Nothing. I sat there in the mess, surrounded by fabric and foam, feeling like a lunatic. Then I saw it. Beneath the couch, almost against the wall, something wedged deep in the crack between the baseboard and the floor. I reached in, fingers brushing dust and grit, until they hit paper. I pulled it out. A photograph. Old, slightly curled at the edges. It showed a woman sitting on a green couch, the couch smiling at the camera. Her hair was pinned back, and she held something in her lap. A photo album. Her face was familiar. Lena. It was her, but younger. Maybe by a decade. And she was in my apartment. Not maybe. Not kind of. The wallpaper was the same. The floor scuffs. Even the small crack near the window where the frame split slightly. This wasn't a coincidence. Lena had lived here, in this apartment. And yet, when I'd seen her yesterday, or whenever that was, she acted like we were strangers. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept the photograph on my nightstand. I kept waiting for the couch to change again. It didn't, but I watched it like it might. And around 3 a.m., something else happened. There was a knock at the wall. Not my door. The wall, the one where 3A used to be. Just once. Then again. And then a voice, muffled, quiet. Mark? It was Mira. Mark. Her voice was clear this time. Too clear. It wasn't muffled like it should have been. Not if it was coming from the other side of solid wall. It was like it was inside the apartment with me, hovering just behind my left shoulder. I turned sharply. Nothing. The couch sat still. The air was thick with silence. Then the knock came again. 3 times. Steady. Not demanding, just waiting. I walked slowly toward the wall where 3A had been, half expecting it to vanish in a mist as I approached. But it didn't. It remained solid, unmarked, ordinary. Except for the cold. The closer I got, the colder the air became. Not like a draft. Not natural. It was sharp and dry, like stepping into a basement that hadn't been opened in years. I placed my palm flat against the wall. It vibrated. Not a sound. A feeling. Like a low hum beneath the surface. Like something was waiting on the other side. Mira. I whispered. No response. I pressed my ear to the wall. Still nothing. And then, a whisper. Help me. It was so faint I nearly convinced myself I imagined it. But it was there. Words drawn out like breath fogging on glass. Help me. It's not right. He's not him. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. The couch was behind me now, but it wasn't mine anymore. Not even pretending. The green floral pattern, the soft velvet texture, the sagging left cushion, and on it sat the photo album. Not lying. Sitting upright. As if someone had placed it there carefully, reverently. I didn't move at first. I was afraid that if I blinked, the album would vanish, or worse, that it wouldn't. But curiosity's a sharp hook. I stepped forward and picked it up. It was heavy. The kind of weight old photo albums carry. The kind passed down, not printed last year. The cover was forest green, like the couch, and trimmed with faded gold thread. There was no name, no date. I opened it. The first photo was the one I'd already found, Lena on the couch. But as I flipped, the pages got stranger. One photo showed the apartment as I knew it now. Same couch, same table, but with Victor sitting in my spot, eyes fixed on camera. He looked younger, sharper. The next, Mira, standing by the hallway, holding something behind her back. Then Lena again. Then me asleep on the couch. Same clothes from that night. Same awkward sprawl. I stared at it, breath caught in my throat. I flipped to the next page. The space was blank, just a black frame waiting for a photo. But under it, handwritten in neat cursive. The last one, must always choose. The lights in the apartment flickered. The couch creaked, not for me. And from behind the wall, I heard a single final knock. Then silence. I stood there, clutching the photo album, heart hammering in my throat. The last one, must always choose. I flipped the page again, hoping for answers. Another blank space. And beneath it, a second note, scratched more hastily. He always comes back. The lights flickered again, this time holding just long enough for the room to fall into a momentary dark hush. When they returned, the couch was empty. No photo album, just the green velvet, smoothed out like no one had ever touched it. But the scent in the room had changed. The lavender detergent, the one from their apartment, was everywhere now. It seeped into my clothes, my skin, the couch itself. It was no longer mine and hadn't been for some time. I moved toward the wall again. This time I didn't knock. I pressed my hand flat against it and whispered, Mira. The wall shuddered beneath my palm. Once, then again, like something breathing. The surface rippled. Not dramatically, not like in movies. It was more like a shimmer, like heat rising off pavement warping the air just barely. I pressed harder, and without warning, my hand sank through. No pain, no force, no resistance, just cold. I pulled back immediately, stumbling, heart threatening to tear free from my chest. I stared at the wall, half expecting it to return to solid. But it didn't. A faint outline had formed, a doorway, just visible now, a frame pressed into plaster. It was 3A. I could see it now. Faint numbers above the frame. A handle glinting dull brass. The same door I'd walked through days ago, or hours, or never. Only this time, it wasn't unlocked. There was something scribbled across the wood in black marker, jagged and uneven, like it had been written in panic. Once you enter, you finish it. I stood before it, breathing hard. The album was gone. The couch was waiting. And behind this door, I felt it. Lena, Victor, Mira, or what was left of them. My fingers hovered over the handle. I didn't want to know what was on the other side. But something in me, the same pull that had brought me here that first night, was stronger. Not curiosity, responsibility. I had crossed into their world, slept in their place, sat on their couch. Now the house wanted me to finish what I started. I closed my hand around the doorknob. It turned. The door opened, and I stepped through. I stepped through the doorway and immediately felt the air change. It was cooler, heavier, like walking underwater. The apartment was just as I remembered it from that first night. Soft lighting, faded green couch with floral patterns, the photo album resting open on the coffee table. But the faces in the photos on the walls, they weren't quite right anymore. Lena's smile looked strained. Victor's eyes, sharp and wary, seemed to follow me as I moved. Myra's presence was everywhere. A whisper in the curtains, a shadow behind the door, the faint scent of lavender. Then I saw it, a framed photograph on the mantelpiece. Me, sitting on that couch, eyes wide but empty. The caption beneath read, "The one who comes back." I heard the door close behind me, but when I looked back, the hallway was gone. There was only the apartment, only the couch, only the album, and the faintest sound of knocking. Knocking from inside the walls, from inside me. I realized then what I had become, another shadow, trapped in this endless loop, another story waiting to be finished. And as the couch embraced me, I understood the truth. Some doors don't lead home. They lead somewhere else.